Hello, testing. Everybody good?
Test.
Gotcha,
I'm
loud and
good.
clear.
Hello, gentlemen. Good evening.
How are we doing today, guys?
Dandy.
It's good. It's good.
Dandy.
It's good.
Chad, Evan, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Your happy smiling faces.
Yeah.
Thanks for everyone that's tuning in. This is a live Q&A. That stands for question and answers, which we'll have a lot of, I hope, on everything you need to know about how to build a shipping container home per us. So, of course, Evan and I know everything between the two of us. So we have Chad here. I'm pretty sure we could solve every problem in the world at this point. But I'm excited to do this. I think we've been trying to do this for a little while. I certainly have wanted to do this for a while, and I know people have kind of asking. So I'm actually just happy that we can finally get there, go live, and just answer questions and explain a little bit about what we did, what we're doing, why we're doing it, why we are trying to do something different, and hopefully this will help people answer questions and get more interest out there. And we'll see what happens. But yeah, we are going to jump in. I don't know if you guys had anything early you wanted to talk about, if we want to chit chat a little bit about anything. Everybody that's lurking on the chat, if you have questions, anytime you want to drop them in there, we will certainly get to those and answer questions that you have. But in the meantime, I think we'll just preface it by, I think maybe talking a little bit about what we just did. It's called the Nook. It is a shipping container home in the mountains of Colorado. People have even asked me, what is a shipping container home? So we'll get it real simple at the beginning and just, it's a home. Yes, it's a home. Even family members have asked me that. I don't know, Evan, if you want to preface, like talking a little bit about what it is, where we started. This is definitely Evan and I's baby. And I say that because it had a long gestation period of over 2 years of R&D and talking and chatting and podcasts and trying to figure out if we could build a home using, as I've said, shipping containers. And this is, some people know what I'm talking about. Others I've very recently been talked to have no idea. When I say that to them, they're just like, wait, out of like what, metal boxes? And I said, yeah. And then there's the blank, deer in headlights stare, and we have to kind of go into it further. But why don't you talk a little bit about how we got here?
Yeah, we got here. It's probably actually started close to 5 years ago. I was initially looking at land in a part of Colorado where big, beautiful houses are built. I was considering building for myself at the time, but the lots were cheap. And I couldn't quite figure out why the lots were so cheap and beautiful lots. Yet there's $1 million homes here. And well, long story short, it was really poor conditions to build in terms of site work. Lots of rock, lots of that kind of stuff. And as Shane and I will cover in this, we get it now. We had to do some dynamiting, which certainly made this less inexpensive. Less inexpensive.
I like that term.
Yeah. And I think at that point, I was just looking at any possible way to solve that problem. And then, that's where Shane kind of comes in. We started talking about it. We looked at shipping container construction. Containers are designed to be stacked 7, 8 high or whatever it is on a boat. They all are very, very highly engineered structures with, so nonetheless, we thought, well, this would be perfect, right? If we could build these on caissons or whatever, then we could just drop them in, cut them out, and that would solve the big problem. But we weren't sure about their lendability. We weren't sure about a lot of that stuff. And I think that's kind of what started our initial inquiries in it. And during that process of just doing some discovery, they all of a sudden got approved for basically a standardized form of construction. Right, so they're in the 2018 now International Code Book.
2018 and 2021, they've got their own sections. I'll preface that by saying in the 2018 Code Book there was just some language Section wise, there was just some language on adaptability to conventional construction, that being just building science wise, where you think about people at same questions. How do you insulate it? How do you frame it? What do you do with the roof? So there was some of that dictated. By 2021, which is the latest code book, we've got basically an explanation of, yes, this is a acknowledged building practice, and this is the way you have to do it to get it to where everything else is built. So,
and then when Fannie Mae recognized it as a standard form of construction, which means it's lendable, then they were houses. It wasn't like if you built one, they'd be like, well, we can't really do a comparable to this. There's no comps for it. It's like, no, the house right next door is a comp. It's really no difference if a house was made of brick or if a house was a concrete home or was just siding on it. So you're really just talking about the exterior of the home being steel versus like brick, for example. So we were very interested. We were also interested in how shipping containers could solve some additional problems. And we were really interested in really reevaluating, or I guess identifying what some of those problems were, and then weighing that against, is this a solution to that? So think, for example, pest control, right? So not a lot of termite issues with shipping container homes. Fire, that's a big one here in Colorado. The wind, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquake. I mean, these things are meant to be out in the exposed sea to all elements. So we thought, all right, it already in regards to that is better. Now the question is, can you build one at or less than the same price of traditional stick-built new construction? And we kind of determined, yes, we could. Then that led us to our next thing, Shane, which was looking at land up in Colorado. And if not everyone here is in Colorado, you can probably imagine it's as pretty as you think it is. And everybody would love to have a cabin up in the mountains. But we started noticing a few issues. Again, lots of beautiful lots, affordable lots, but a lot of people looking to buy secondary property. And Shane and I thought that was a unique kind of situation. You had tons of buyers, very small inventory. There's hardly ever cabins that come for sale, ones that you would want to buy. And so, wow, big pool of people looking. And as we kind of started evaluating that, we realized that it's tough to build in the mountains. It is hard to find people to go up from the Front Range, trades, etc., to drive an hour and a half, 2 hours at minimum, and to get material up there, to even get things as simple as a porta potty up there, to get roll-off dumpster services up there. And we realized this is probably what's going on, that if somebody bought land, if somebody wanted a cabin, the process seemed to be buy land, struggle through 3 to 4 years of getting a cabin built for yourself, and then never sell it and pass it down to your family. So we were interested in addressing that problem and taking a look at that. This build took us a little less than a year. And if we probably did it again, we could probably do it in 6 months. If it was Park County, we could do it at least substantially faster than that, and maybe even faster than that. It depends.
Yeah,
but
the structure part was certainly less than a traditional stick built home would have been. We did run into, like Evan prefaced, we ran into some other things just, from mountain building site work. We did have to blast a lot of rock. We were doing a lot of dynamiting for site work, driveway, excavation, so forth. But those are things you're going to run into regardless. But I think on the modular side, meaning, we're kind of prefabbing some of the construction offsite and bring it on. It was definitely a pretty quick process, even for, this first project. So, yeah.
And I would say this, it's a good thing for anyone interested in building one or designing one or buying one even, I guess, really. One of the benefits of shipping container construction, and Shane's alluding this to the modular, but we'll just talk about shipping containers. And this was a semi-modular build. We didn't build the entire thing off-site and have it assembled on site. We had the containers go to a separate site where we had them cut out, pre-engineered, sandblasted, primed, ready to go, reinforced, and then had them sent up to the location and craned in. And one of the first benefits is even if you just did that, so imagine the containers coming together, there's no framing, there's no nothing in there, you just have the raw structure of the containers with all the cutouts. The benefit is we got to do site work while we were also doing that. Whereas traditional build, that first 2x4 doesn't go up until you're passing your inspections on the foundation. Mm-hmm. So as soon as we were able to pass our inspections for our site work and foundation, the very next day the containers were there and they were in place, and we were almost right to framing them. That is one of the benefits, and that could be, you can make that argument that's a benefit for any modular construction or semi-modular construction. But in this regard, that was one of our benefits. We just had such a delay, and some of these were unanticipated, whether it was with the county, which actually we didn't have any issue with the county. It's just the fact that they were busy, understaffed. Park County in Colorado, a small mountain county. The building department didn't have a lot of people, a lot of plans in their department. So we had to wait almost 2 months before we got approved for our general construction permit. And then we ran into, we have all this acreage, and we decided to put this container in a really pretty spot, way up on top of the hill behind these rock enclaves. And that happens to be right the only spot pretty much on the entire property where a granite vein is just running down, following where our site is, along where we want our driveway, and several dynamiting episodes later, which you think, oh, that's great, just blow it up and push it all out. Well, then you have a boulder problem, which was another
you have your own gravel company after that. You have
with hundreds of multiple ton boulders now to navigate, and then getting the machinery up there, getting an operator up there in the mountains. So that was just a huge, it cost us probably 30% of our time was all there. Mm-hmm. So, and then outside of that, I think for Shane and I, going back to just why we did this and how we did this, it's kind of like a paid education. The property is currently just finished. It is on the market for sale, and we can put the address somewhere in here, I think, right?
And you can go on Chad for that.
Yeah. You guys will realize this during this. I'm not the tech guy. I see stuff. Can it get in here somewhere?
Push a button.
But we did do that. I would say, it was something we wanted to do. We wanted to go through it. I think what's also really interesting about this is if you're an objective thinker, an objective problem solver, or a creative investor, not just shipping containers, but shipping containers is a really interesting platform to look and solve other problems, whether that is ADUs, whether that is commercial use, storage use. There's so much that you can do with them. I had a guy that I'm speaking with who wants luxury hunting blinds on all of his hunting preserves because, again, they're outside, they're steel, and they'll last forever. So guy who charges a lot of money for people to come and hunt on his land and to process all the meat for those people and etc. So instead of putting them up in a drafty cold blind, he would like to figure out how to use 10-foot containers to put his guests up in. So there is so much use for it, and it really just, I think that is probably one of the main reasons Shane and I wanted to do this, is see where would this lead, what other opportunities could we do with this, and getting your hands on one, working with one, going through all of that was one of the big benefits of doing this. But I think I covered it, right? Yeah.
Fantastic job.
No.
Wonderful.
It was
Great.
it was great. And I wanted to actually pause you guys before we really
Yeah.
jumped into all of that. But I mean, it's so great regardless. Because when you're talking about manufacturing these, these containers, the way that you guys do it, I think it might be hard for people to mentally draw the line of like, all right, where does this actually not fit in as a like modular or manufactured home, and how does it get qualified as a traditional home and qualify for conventional financing or even a USDA loan if it's in the middle of rural America?
Right. Well, I think the biggest caveat that with a lot of these types of builds, especially shipping container homes, is people assume it's just a steel box and just gets dropped on the land, right? And it leans towards this. Well, wait, so it's a manufactured home, or it's a home that's a mobile home, which it's actually not a home as people are understanding. Mobile home,
homes.
yeah, mobile home is a structure that sits on a piece of land in a community, and that land is actually not owned by the person that's living in the mobile home. It's actually leased to that person, and the person that actually is owning that parcel, which is not even divvied up, it's not parceled out, it's just a bunch of mobile homes sitting on one piece, owns that. So it's basically just like a giant apartment complex, except it's all level on one piece of ground, as opposed to running 40 stories high. They're not mobile homes, and the difference is anything that has a structural condition, so it's either on piers, it's on spread footing stem wall, anything you guys have seen as far as how a house sits. How does a house get built? It's sitting there, it's fixed, it's not going anywhere, there's no wheels, there's no trailer hitch, it's there on the property, it's a structure, which is why we were kind of talking about the IRC and the 2018 code book and the 2021 code book. It has to be on a foundation that's allowed by the IRC, which is the residential code. That's what makes it a home.
Cool.
It doesn't matter what we use to build them with. In fact, in the area that I live in, after we had a crazy, what they call a wildfire in Boulder County, it really wasn't even a wildfire, but there's more that's required now as homes are being rebuilt in these areas where the homes burned down. More metals required, more structures required, which means more cost to these people. And that's where we looked at that and said, well, if there's going to be more of that anyway, then why not build it with more metal to begin with, and maybe in a more, I wouldn't say unconventional, but it's not realized in the world, as Evan and I talk about all the time, the world of it's 2023 and we're still using certain techniques to build homes. Why are we doing that? This is one of those cases where we can take a metal box, a reused box, where it's a lot of these don't ever get reused. It's a one-trip container that just ends up being sat somewhere for someone to buy for storage or whatever it is. We can take these things, cut them out, put them together, and build a home out of them. The same way you'd think about a lot of commercial construction where there's a lot of metal. There's metal framing. There's tilt-up concrete where there's metal inside, or iron inside the walls that are being built. This is the same kind of deal. It's just there's metal construction along with wood framing. There's a lot of ways to do this. So long-winded answer, but that's what this is about is like, we can use other materials besides just going back. I mean, we can go back 50, 60 years framing the house the same way we are today. Why are we still doing that? It's too much money.
Right.
Yeah. And I would add to that too. It is probably, Chad, one of the biggest points of confusion for most people. And it's whenever something is unfamiliar, and maybe even a caveat to that, when something is so standardized as construction, right? Houses have been basically, for the most part, being built the same way for 50, 60, 70 years or whatever, right? That it's like, it's different, right? And it is in their mindset, and we hear that feedback all the time. And even when we just put this up on the market, people look at it, and we've even had feedback like, it seems expensive for a container home. And it's like, does it seem expensive? And it tells us that there is a trigger in their brain that says this is like a mobile home, right?
Right.
And it's like, does it look like a mobile home? I mean,
Yeah.
it's not even remotely looks like it. For people who haven't seen it, it's 3 containers, where the 2 middle containers are completely opened, so it makes a big 40-foot by 16-foot room. The third container in the back is the bedrooms, but then we have these semi-cantilevered bump outs on the last one where the beds go in with big, huge pieces of glass. So your bed's pretty much right up against a giant picture window. The front of it has a 16-foot nano wall on it that completely opens up. It's in our opinion, and it's beautiful. But it's a house, and I think it's just this. I'm not familiar with it, and neither are potentially if I had to have it maintenanced. We were talking about that before that. If someone comes up and they're just like, wait, I don't know how to work on this. Yes, you do. It's a house.
It's a house.
It has framing. It has insulation. It has all the MEPs. It has hardwood floors. Hey, there you go.
Pull it up.
Yeah, technology. God, amazing. But it has all the things that a house would have. So it's just a little, I think, new to people, and they think something must be different about it. It's probably the first time, for the architectural people listening, it's probably in the same time when you had in the 60s, you had mid-century modern architecture or brutalism, which is like, the real concrete homes.
Mm-hmm.
People were like, what is this? But now even that, we're like, well, those are homes. It's just different architecturally. Same thing here. This is just a exterior steel structure, but everything else is completely normal. But I do think it throws people off in terms of, is it a house? And it's 100% a house. And there's really nothing different to it outside of just the form of construction.
Yeah. So, and that's obviously a piece of what I attempt to convey to people is like, yeah, I understand how you might think of this as looking like a mobile or like a manufacturer modular home, but it's on a fixed foundation. This thing is not moving, just like you can't move your house.
Right.
And if that's the case, it qualifies for traditional financing.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because there are real estate agents out there that do not get that either. So it's just a matter of making sure people understand and know that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Cooper. Good to see you. Yeah, that's exactly right, Chad. I mean, it's and as we're going, kind of, you guys can see the photos coming through here. I mean, I'll even make a comment to my mother at the beginning of this whole thing, because she's, as Evan knows, his aunt, the one of the most pessimistic people. That's the nicest one of the nicest people you ever meet, and the most pessimistic.
The nicest pessimistic person you'll ever meet.
She's
Aunt Connie.
She's questioning everything, but she was one of those people like, well, what's it gonna look like? Is it going to just be what is it going to look like? It's going to look like a house.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you guys can see in here that that's what we got. We got a house here.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. And listen, we're sitting here on YouTube streaming this and talking about stuff, but at the same time, you can go to YouTube and find a million different, and I'm not exaggerating, a million different photos and videos of container homes all across the country, even across the world. I mean, I think even the stuff that I've looked at recently, there's so many cool things happening in Europe, Asia, like especially like Japan has really kind of taken hold to this. Coastal countries for sure.
I've seen them in Australia.
In the last Olympics, they built one of the soccer stadiums for the Olympics where were the Olympics? Where were they just at? Just the last summer or
summer.
Oh gosh, no, it was like summer, really hot in the Middle East. People couldn't believe that they were hosting the
Rio de Janeiro.
Not Dubai, but it's like Dubai.
Rio de Janeiro.
No.
Yes.
No. God. Somebody put it in the chat. This is like one of those things. Like, I'm not going to sleep. Right. Anyways, but they built the entire stadium that held, I think, 80,000 people. all out of
So,
shipping containers.
your last one was in Paris, or sorry, that's coming up this year.
That's
Paris.
coming up.
Before that,
Come on.
Tokyo. It has Tokyo.
It
I don't
was-
know if it's
No,
Tokyo. That doesn't seem right.
jeez.
Beijing was the Winter
No.
Olympics.
I think you're thinking of the
Last-
World Cup because the World Cup was in Saudi
Yeah.
Arabia.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't
I
the
am.
Olympics.
In Dubai.
But I know it was the yes.
Okay.
I just remember that. I know what you're talking about now, and that's exactly what it was. It was the World Cup, and it was they had to
Okay.
play those games late at night because of how hot
Mhm.
it was. Yeah.
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 Okay. Okay. Whew.
Forgive
That
us
was-
for that.
Oh, yeah.
It's tough. Tangent. All right.
But it is like with a lot of things. I hate to say this. Well, I shouldn't say that. The rest of the world sometimes is a better progressive innovator of things, and sometimes we're the laggard. You know, I'm sure there's a lot of people who are like, excuse me, we're doing Tesla. It's true. We're self-landing rockets. We're doing all that. So I take that back. But this is one of those things where it is more widely adopted than probably it is here. It's probably because it's such a, I don't know, Shane, you can talk about this probably for hours. We probably shouldn't, but just the construction industry here as a whole is really set in stone, and the trades are the trades, and any kind of disruption to that can be sometimes met with some pushback just because it is job threatening. If we start 3D printing houses, that's not great for framers.
That's right.
Right. So there's going to be a natural pushback, and the same is true with lenders. The same is true with realtors. The same is true with a lot of that. And it's just going to require some normalcy and education and exposure. And pretty soon that will dissipate. But it is ripe for that to be, for this to have its own space.
Yeah. And I will say also, especially when, as Evan touched on, the threat to a lot of trades. And I mean, I'm a big proponent of this industry for so many reasons, and I think it gets gotten a lot of bad publicity and negative connotation for so many different reasons. Guys that are framers or concrete contractors or plumbers, or whatever, they're not smart enough they didn't make it somewhere else, they didn't go to school, blah 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 blah, so they're in this industry. But the other part of it is that, well, we have to do it a certain way, and there is that pushback. But I think when you get into alternative construction, the idea is, how do you drop cost? That's the reason why you're doing that. How do you make it better but drop cost? Because if the costs continue to be climbing the way that they have been the last 5-6 years, I'm going to be out of a job, because nobody's going to be able to afford me to build them a home or to remodel a home or do an addition. They're going to say no thank you. And the only people left will be the production builders. Well, the production builders don't care what they do. If they have no subs at all, it's probably better for them because they have less overhead. I mean, if they could 3D print all of the model homes and all of the homes in a subdivision, they would of course do that if the cost was not prohibitive right now. They would do that and take everybody off the job site. There'd be no reason to hire framers and concrete contractors and bring in whoever, because they can build almost the entire home from a computer. So there is a point where there's a threshold between just those kind of builders and then the rest of the world. And if bringing the containers into this conversation, there's a time and place for those. And we've talked about this. We've looked at it. I've had many conversations. I've had, especially with guys that have done a ton of them, Containing Luxury and Blake, who's exploding all over the country right now, building container homes. He's building one unit at a time in a warehouse, but they're one container homes. And the reason he's doing that is because it's cost effective to do it that way. If you're trying to build a home out of 25 containers, it's not cost effective. If you want a custom home and you want to look a certain way, there's no way you're going to just use containers unless you just wanted to have it built out of containers, because it's not cost effective to do it that way. You've overfabricated. I think even on the Nook, we could probably take one of the containers out of our design and just run a simple welded C-channel box for the middle container. Don't even buy a container for the middle one, right? Save $5-6 grand right there.
Yeah.
So there's a time and place for these. And I think for all kinds of alternative construction. So the pushback just needs to be answered with that answer is like, listen, this isn't the entire industry. This is for a type of, we're trying to solve a problem. It's for a type of build. And if you're trying to do it, like I said, with a bunch of containers, you're either going to sell it as a very, idealistic home, or you're going to be way over the top on your construction budget. And it's not going to make sense.
Yeah, and this might lead into a good subject too for this group and to some of the people who are tuning in, is the investment side of this. We were lucky. Shane and I have another partner in this, Daryl. And it, I do.
Is Daryl in the chat? Hi, Daryl. Say hi, Daryl. Don't be a creeper.
He is. He can't help it.
I like to be a creeper.
But it does require a little bit of, I don't know, I'm trying to think of the right word, a little bit of courage to look at this and to have a little bit of foresight, and which I think is a good investor anyways, right? If you're just trying to get in on the investments on what everybody else is investing on, you're probably not a great investor. That's my opinion. You should probably be trying to find what is about to happen and invest in that. Maybe not I just crapped on investors.
Don't listen to Evan about this.
My point is, I think a great investor, there you go, is one that is looking for things that are coming down the line, opportunities down the line, and trying to get out in front of those and almost setting trends in terms of investment instead of just saying, what is working? I read this great book. And I was like, listen, if you're already reading a book about it, you're probably late to the party. And the real big window has probably passed you. So Daryl was willing to take this on with Shane and I and go through it. And it's not for the faint of heart, right? Because,
right.
I mean, you got to imagine somebody giving you money to build something that you've never built before, right? So it's not that we haven't built homes, we haven't done this. And it's like, how much is this going to cost? I think how much is it to weld and stitch 3 containers together and make them waterproof? I guess we're going to find out. You know, it's tough. So I think even on the investor side of it, anyone who's looking at it as an investment, it does take a little bit because, you might say, well, this only costs X amount of dollars to do this. Well, that's true. If there's 50 people who are willing to do that, that is simple capitalism at that point. It creates a competitive environment where bids get lower to try to get jobs. But when you only have one guy that's saying, I'm willing to do it, and your choice is either to use that guy, that trade, or have nobody do it, you're a little bit leveraged in that situation. So having a good team, understanding that a little bit will help control your costs. And I think that's why if we did this again, if we built a Nook just like we did, it would be substantially different. We really, I think at this point, know what to expect. We'd probably actually not make a flat roof, right, Shane? We'd probably actually build some sort of pitch roof. That would have given us a little bit more ceiling height because we could have insulated above instead of basically framing down the ceilings and insulating. So maybe this is a good point to kind of go specifically into the build just a little bit, Chad. I think some people might have some interest in that, some do's and don'ts.
Yeah.
Unless you have an agenda you want us to follow.
I don't really have an agenda. I just like, if someone were to just feel super ambitious and they're like, man, I want to do this on my own. What? Like, let's just walk them through step by step. Like, what do they need to do? Like, what's the first thing? Like, how would they even source a container in order to start working on this?
There are Google. So there's this amazing thing on the internet.
What?
No way.
And then there's another one called YouTube. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
You would start the process just like you would start if you were going to build a home. I'm just going to really try to pound that into the ground here. There is nothing different technically than what you think. I think people still believe, oh, how would I do this? Well, how would you build a home, right? So Yes, you would have to find a place where you can buy containers. So let's start there. Well, I'm skipping over a huge step, which are plans,
Yes, the
architectural
architectural plans.
drawings, a lot, all that kind of stuff. So let's just assume you've done that. Yeah, we can get to that for sure too. And Shane, you can talk specifically about that. But even here
I'll
in
handle some of those.
Colorado, we're a complete landlocked state, right? We're nowhere near where ships are, right? So, and then I think we just Googled shipping containers for sale, Colorado, and there are regional distributors here. And we went and looked at their yard, and we found out that there are basically 3 containers that you can buy generally, which are new, single use, and used. And of course, those come in all different sizes, right? You can get 40 foot, 20 foot, 10 foot. And then you can get the standard 8 foot tall ones, or you can get what's called high cubes, which are 9.5 feet, which absolutely use the high cubes. You know, it's a fractionally more money. And if you really don't want to feel like you're in a box, get a high cube. So you can have normal to borderline high ceilings. The new containers are great. If you're concerned about people looking at upcycled material, then I would say go ahead and get the new. For what you're going to spend, just get new containers so you don't have anyone saying this one's dented. Yeah, it's a used container. If you're interested in using upcycled materials, I mean, these are in the millions sitting around not getting used in the United States. And by the way, that is because we import more than we export. That then get a single use. I would completely avoid the used ones. You start to run in structural integrity issues. Some of the damage is so much that you don't want to compromise the structural integrity of them. Also, the used ones, you have to really start getting into what were they used for. And I think that's why the single-use ones or the new are better. If they were carrying if they were carrying food, paint material, chemicals, then you have to do a lot just to get it to where, I mean, you're putting people in this, right? So you just want to avoid all that. You can get a container's manifest. They'll have those where they sell them so they can say where they got them from and what they were used for. But again, new, single use. At that point, you can purchase them. They'll likely deliver them wherever you want them to be delivered. Usually not that expensive. The container market's up and down a little bit, kind of like the stock market is. So I think when we first started talking about this, a new container was like $4,000. And by the time we were ready to build, because of what was going on with COVID and everything else, they got all the way up to I think a new one was like 9,500. Single use was 7,000, and then a used, depending on their condition, were anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000. And so we went with the single use, except for our middle one, which was used, because we knew we were removing almost all of the walls at them. So all we just needed were the 2 ends to look good. Yep. And so we looked at a bunch of used ones to save money, and then we cut the living shit out of that. And we're just stood there looking at a pile of steel, like, why did we even buy this container? That seems like a lot of money sitting over there. But that's how the containers work. It's really not that hard. I picked up the phone and called and said, can I buy some containers? And they sell containers, so they make that very easy on you. You're going to need to get an engineer and an architect that is okay understanding this. That was one of our other initial delays, was finding someone who wanted to put a stamp on this, because it's just unfamiliar with them. So that is probably the best place to start. I skipped over the whole architectural part and the engineering part and all the stuff in the beginning. It is technical, obviously. People go to school for it, I heard.
That's the rumor.
But that's where I would start. Find someone who is comfortable.
Would that have to be in your own state? Would you have to get an engineer like in the state you want to build in to sign off on it? I just
No,
want to be clear on
no,
that. Okay.
no. That's actually a great question. The answer is no, but they do have to be licensed in the state you're building.
Cool.
A lot of engineers are licensed in multiple states.
Yeah.
It is better to go with someone that's local because when it comes to you're still going to require to get a soils report done.
Mhm.
You're still have to go through those standard steps for site work. And depending on what your infrastructure is, whether it's city, sewer, and water, whether it's going to be septic and a well, whatever it is, those steps still have to be taken. And so the engineers going to need that information. I'm actually in the process of starting another one in the same area, but the engineer is actually out of state, licensed in Colorado, but not in the state. So
Cool.
walking him through some of that information as far as the soil conditions, what does that mean? Engineers are going to be overly cautious unless they're fully familiar with those conditions. If they're going to be overly cautious, means it's going to be slightly over-engineered, which is part of the problem I think I see with a lot of these container builds. And again, that defeats the purpose of the cost effectiveness of using these things. Is we're trying to keep that budget as tight as possible. And if we just kind of slide into, well, it's going to be good enough if we go this way, then, well, yeah, but the metal's more expensive. That beam is more than I need. This footing is wider than I need. There's more concrete or blah, blah, blah. So that's something that you got to keep in mind when you're designing this. What's the best way to do it? Long answer, yes, engineer can be anywhere as long as they're licensed in the state to stamp this thing, but it's better to have someone local.
Yep.
And I think in the beginning, you also have to make a decision on the functionality of the build and the design. And I think that's one of the first things that you're going to have to grapple with. You are a little limited in terms of design. They're boxes, they're, and like Shane alluded to earlier, I think people see pictures of ones that are, cantilevering and doing all of this, and absolutely you can do that. Sure. It's not cost effective. They're meant to be stacked. There's specific point loads on the ends. They're structured that way. So anytime you kind of start messing with that too much, you're going to have to start re-engineering them. So I think the first thing you have to do is how beautiful, how interesting aesthetically can I make boxes? And by the way, I love that, right? Not just that I love boxes, but I love the challenge of trying to address that. It's easy to, it's like, it's in the same line as it's really easy to be happy when you have a bunch of money, right? Can you really be happy when you don't have any? That's the true challenge. And it's kind of the same thing. It's like, sure, I can be really happy if I have an architect, a world famous architect, build this most interesting structure on the planet. And it's like, but can you make something beautiful and be limited in its spatial layout? And and I see some of the questions here, and there is some decisions there right from the get-go, right? And it is steel on the outside, and thermal bridging and all of this stuff is something you have to address. And it's not like, oh, look how problematic this is. No, it's just decisions, right? And you can frame them from the inside and you can insulate them. You do need to spray foam them so there's no, because it's corrugated metal, and you got to really get the foam in there so you don't have, pockets of air, because the metal will heat up and it will cool down. And before we sprayed foamed, I thought it was fun, all the science that was going on in there, which is like, oh my God, it's literally like a glass of ice, right? And then the outside condensates and then the inside does, and until you get that thing insulated. I remember panicking, and I think I called you, Shane. I was up there that day, and I think you were still back in the city, and I'm like, oh my God, it's condensating like crazy in here. And you were just like, yeah, we haven't insulated yet.
It's cold outside. It's
cold,
snowing. Yeah.
And you got a space heater going on inside, and we hadn't insulated yet. But one of the other things you can do is make a decision on how you want this to look, right? So do you want this to be steel on the outside? Do you like that aesthetic? You do not have to have that aesthetic on the outside. You can frame on the outside of these, which is probably better for so we've heard. It's better in terms of some of the things that I'm addressing, but now you have to clad the outside somehow, and you lose the container look, right? So if you like that, then great. Then you have all kinds of options. And we looked at that. Actually, at one point, wanted this to look like a big concrete block, and we were trying to figure out whether or not we could be using like cement board as our sheathing on the outside, so we could actually make this look actually like a big giant concrete block. But then what you're going to have on the inside, if you don't frame, is you're going to have to, for your MEPs and stuff, you're going to have exposed conduit. You're going to have exposed ventilation if that's what you're doing.
Your assemblies will be trickier. Cabinets, vanities, you know, anything
all
you
of
put
that
on
stuff.
the walls. And I did actually want to touch on just add on to the question I answered for Keith a little bit earlier, if he's still here, that I've had this question a lot. It's like, yes, but you can insulate, which is a very loose term, from the inside, but then you still have all this metal exposed on the outside, which is going to create heat. Well, it also can create cold, as Evan saw, and we saw in the mountains in the middle of the winter. And that's what thermal bridging is. It's just basically you have two conditions, one's outside, one's inside, and one's going to be hotter or colder than the other depending on the time of year or whatever. And what that does is it creates condensation. Same thing, just great example was the glass of water with ice in it, right? That's a question that's easy to understand because it's a metal box, and we don't use in conventional construction, we use just metal on the outside most of the time. Well, a lot of the municipalities in Boulder County are now requiring metal roofs almost everywhere. Metal roofs have a 50-year warranty. Metal roofs are better than a composite shingle. Metal roofs are far superior in so many ways. What keeps the metal roof from having that same sort of thermal bridging? It's the exact same answer. It's the way you insulate. It's what you're sealing from the inside. It's your building science envelope and the assembly that's put together. I don't like to use closed cell all the time everywhere, but that is one of the best ways to break that bridging, is especially with a roof. It's the same deal. And that's been allowed forever, obviously. You just have to break the bridging that's created, which means you're trapping the outside to the outside and you're keeping the inside on the inside as the building envelope. So it's no different than using it for a metal roof. It's the exact same assembly you would do for the rest of the box itself. And if you do it that way, then you'll have no problems.
Yeah, and I think the other thing for getting started on this is just what we're alluding to is making some initial decisions and finding just the right people, like you would have to anyways. You would need architectural plans, and you would need engineered plans to submit to your city or your county building office to be able to build something. So you still have to start there. It is probably a little bit more limiting. It's not a giant pool of people. I do think it requires a little bit of education on this person's part, only to be able to speak to some of these people that are unfamiliar with it. So if you're going to look at building one, familiarize yourself with it a little bit. Know things like, listen, you can just copy and paste what we're saying almost. It is in the 2018 code book. It is Fannie Mae approved for standardized construction, right? You can go look those things up, but have those in your pocket. And then if someone's like, listen, I think I'm okay doing this, but I've just never, like if you're an engineer, you're talking to an engineer, I just have never done one, and I'm not sure what engineering requirements are. And just say, look, it's people do them. They're around. I know I can do this because I tuned into a live stream. And so whatever it is, be a little bit prepared to have some of those. You don't have to be an expert by any means. Because the experts are people who have general contracting license, and they're already an expert. They may not know it, but they are an expert in building shipping container homes because they're homes. And so it just requires a little bit of narrative from your part. So that's just a heads up. But getting a container that's where you would start, figuring out how big you want, making sure that maybe this is something else too, Chad, because this was a little, for Shane and I, as experienced as we were with construction and design and doing all of this kind of stuff, this was at least new for me. I realized in the design part of it, how much I had to check with Shane on what I could do, right? Like in terms of the design. Normally it is, Shane cutting me loose and just saying, make it pretty, Evan. But this was like, well, hold on a sec, can I do this? Right? There was a lot more of that. So having a good general contractor that is ready for this a little bit is good. So if you have a designer or if you're designing it, and some of this is just positioning the containers, the best way to lay them out, to make sure that if you are going to, stagger them a little bit, right? Because you think it would be cool, two butts of them kind of sticking out, you can put glass there, making sure that you know how to get those welded together. So having a good general contracting partner to discuss some of this stuff with when you're just making your decisions. The other thing to take into consideration, this is a big one. So everyone get their pens and paper out. I'll give you a second. Okay. These are big boxes that have to get to a site. So when you're looking at sites, you have to, for the first time, you got to understand a 40-foot box on a truck coming in that has to have a crane pick up that box, swing it somewhere, and set it down. And that is probably one of, I don't know how many sites that Shane and I went and looked at where we would have to just drive it and try to think, can we get a box through here? Because once we buy this lot or we buy this lot, the three of us, Daryl, Shane, and I, we have to make sure that we're not all of a sudden like, well, an unexpected cost was helicoptering one of these in because no truck can get there. Right. So accessibility and knowing that you're doing this. So there's a real interesting look at ADUs, accessory dwelling units, little structures in backyards, right? And it's probably the first question that someone should be asking. It's not, are they cool? Can we do it? What's the cost on this? It is accessibility and making sure that you are, think about this. You're going to probably be in front of the house, craning in over your house, a box, a big metal steel structure. That probably just sent everybody off of this. Like, I'm out.
That doesn't work for me. Yeah.
Right. So getting them rigged right, getting the cranes, accessibility. So making sure that you have a lot or accessibility for just the delivery, locating the containers in your area, making sure that, and you can find them, they'll send them. It might just be a little bit more to have them transported. So that's not that. And again, they're set up to sell and deliver containers, so you don't have to put too much thought into that. Getting with a good engineer that is comfortable. It doesn't have to be a good engineer, just an engineer who's comfortable putting their stamp on something like this. Yeah. Getting with an architect that's considering your budget. And, architects are going to tell you all kinds of cool things. And
they want to sell you on all the skills they have and what they can do and how cool they can make this. And
you're going to have to temper that and say, I'm making a really pretty box here, man.
This is a budget-effective build.
Because you'll see some of them, if you just Google them, you'll see amazing container builds that are clearly for an architect just peacocking, showing his feathers. Yeah. And there was probably not a lot of consideration in terms of costs. There probably was not a lot of containers. It's all about taking this aesthetic and making something really, really unique and beautiful. And I think that also gets people to think, oh, well, this is cool. I can put them up on their ends. I can lay them over. And it's like, of course you can, we can drive robots on Mars apparently, but that doesn't mean you can. Or I would highly advise maybe just tempering that a little bit. But I would say that would be my best advice for someone getting started. It's just those things alone, because that sets you up for it gets you set up for success, because everything else is just a general contractor. It's just builders. It's just electricians. Once you've made good decisions there, you're off and running and you're fine.
Right. Yeah, I think you should have maybe opened with that. Hey, look, it's literally just like any other normal build. It's just the first part is just like sourcing and getting a good engineer to just, sign off on it.
Yep.
Because I think a lot of people are intimidated by, what an undertaking they are, getting themselves into. And I'm sure, there are people out there that do have these really cool designs where maybe it is more cost effective than we even really realize. Maybe it's just a matter of how they engineer, where the support and where the foundation piers are going for these. And technically maybe one isn't even sitting on top of the other. I just got to thinking about how like some of the offset ones might not even be set on top of each other. They might have like a slight gap between them. Right. No, I think it's really important. Yeah. The site is a big piece, and transportation is probably a huge oversight that most people would never think about. Right.
Yeah. And that happens a lot. Huge. Yeah. And that happens a lot in a lot of the world that I live in. Can we do this? And it's just, and Evan's been there too. It's one of those like, well, can we? Yeah, we can do that, but we can do anything for spend. How much you want to spend, show me the money, Jerry Maguire. It can be done, but why use containers? Why are you trying to do this? What's the goal here? That's why I always ask people, because when they're curious, it's about, well, I want to do one. Why? I always ask them why. Because it's cool. Okay, but what are you trying to accomplish? If it's cool and you're trying to do, you're trying to fit, square peg around hole, it's not going to be worth your time and money to do that. Unless you have a lot of money, then go for it, man. Call me, whatever. But it's got to be thought through. The site is a big deal for sure.
Yeah, and I do think that a lot of people think that, and again, I'm going to keep beating on this dead horse. I don't think it's dead yet. Is that there's something unique going on here, and the uniqueness is just what you're starting with. And other than that, there's nothing overly unique outside of the aesthetic, outside of. Let me take a step back. If you're looking for a property or properties, depending on what you're hoping to use them for, whether it is for short-term rental, Airbnb, whether it is for your home, or whether it's for ADUs or whatever it is, one of the big benefits is differentiation, right? If that's what you're looking for. And I think that's where, like with Daryl as the investor, it's like we're one of probably the only shipping container homes available for sale in the United States. And even though you see them all the time, they're not always up, right? People will build them and they're not for sale. They're for them, right? They're for someone to hold on. So this area, I'll talk about this just real quick, if you don't mind, Chad, a little bit of just the investment side of this for us why we made a choice here to do this. So Colorado obviously is a huge tourism state, and there are a lot of great places in Colorado to put a piece of property if you were going to build. There's also really expensive places to build. Some counties in Colorado have put moratoriums on short-term rental. So we built this, one, as a strategy, and two, as a backup plan. This will likely be, the buyer will be somebody who is somewhat investment savvy, even just somewhat. Something that you can use, you and your family or yourself or whoever can use when you want it. Let's put it in an area that has a lot around it to go. So this is in Park County in Colorado. It's close to Fairplay, South Park, right? The famous cartoon. This is in this area. There is the Tarryall River, fly fishing 5 minutes away. The reservoir is another 15 minutes from the river. You're 30 some minutes away from whitewater rafting. You go up over the pass and 45 minutes, you're in Breckenridge where you can ski. So we wanted to put this in a place where we thought this was, as Daryl would say, a drop your bags kind of place. That you can come and you can just drop your bags and you can go explore what Colorado has to offer. So we put this here in Park County because Park County allows short-term rentals. So we were weighing not only the shipping container construction for this, but we were also taking that into consideration in terms of an investment. This is a differentiation approach. if there are 20 Airbnbs on the market and you want a unique experience for your trip, this is it, man. This is cool. All right, you get to sleep in these little bump out cubes, and there's cattle that roam around on the property. We still don't know whose they are. One of them is about to be mine.
And for all the people out there that keep saying free range, that's not how that works. You can't just have cattle on your private property.
They're just out. I don't know where they.
I understand what free
to.
range is. I was being sarcastic, but that's not free range.
Yeah. But so going back to, and that triggered me to talk about that from what you said, Shane, which was, why are you doing this? Mm-hmm. Right? It's an acceptable answer to say, I just want to do something cool. I want to do something different. And yeah, that's a great reason to do it. As long as you understand that, that nook did not cost us $50,000 to build, right? That cost us
a lot more than that.
A lot more than that. It's like building a house. And again, I would say we were still less than new build, especially considering new build in the mountains, which will probably run higher. But we're not talking like 50% less. We're not talking like 70% less. We're talking like 85. We're about 85% of what I think new build would cost. I had to correct that because it sounded like I was about to say 85% less.
Yeah.
About 85% of what new build would be. Yeah.
I'll send you the budget one more time.
Yeah. So, and again, maybe we got it built faster than we would have because of the style of construction. Even with all the delays we had, a builder was up on our site not too long ago, was interested in purchasing it. And I think it was him, or no, actually it was your friend, the broker, Chad, that came up and met me up there. And I said, we built it in less than a year. And he kind of gave a look like, whoa. And he's up there selling property in the mountains. And he's like, wow, that's fast. And I'm thinking, God, it felt like it took forever. But why do you want to build this should be an answer. If you think it's cheaper, or if you think, well, I can just build this in my garage and then go set it down. And it's like, no, it's a house. You're going to have to have special licensing to be able to have inspections being done off site. Like, there is nothing really keeping this from just being a normal build outside of this initial start. It's just the very beginning, starting with the containers. Once that's done, you are in the same place you would be almost anywhere with any build. You got framers, you have drywallers, you have electricians, you have all this stuff. So once you get past that initial design, making sure you're taking into consideration the logistics of moving the containers. And maybe one last thing is you need a good welder. That's a little bit different than normal construction. You need to have a competent welder that is cutting this metal out. Doesn't require anything crazy, just whatever is used to cut steel, right? So plasma, gun, grinders, it's like angle grinders, stuff like that. But you need a competent welder. There is a substantial amount of welding.
Structural construction too.
Yeah.
Structural welding, not just a finish welder. They have to be very confident structurally handling metal and beams and everything else that goes into these things. Putting them together is a whole science in itself.
God, is that true? $500 and up?
Yep.
A foot, jeez. I remember when I was a kid, I'd go to a movie for a quarter and get a Coke and a popcorn. That's what that feels like. $500 a foot. Gee, Merry Christmas. So I think, look, I think it's what a lot of people want to know, and I think that's why people have interest on it. It's like just getting started in that kind of initial uncertainty, but just logic. It's a big metal box. You got to get it somewhere. You got to have someone who can cut it out. But once that's done, you're home free in terms of what might be uncomfortable. Nothing else past that is uncomfortable. And look, there's little things, like, if you're putting exterior trim around your windows, you got to figure out how to get that piece of wood into metal. right? So there's some of that stuff, but again, a competent builder, any builder worth their salt can probably figure all that stuff out. That's not something they're, it's like, I've never seen this before. It's like, okay, yeah, you have. So I think that's it for that, man. I just kind of wanted to cover that a little bit, but I think differentiation is a good reason to do that. And if that fits why you're looking at it, I think you're on the right track. You just have to set the right expectations, get a little bit comfortable with it. You may have to get comfortable with making people comfortable with it. And then you're pretty much off and running.
Yeah, for the most part you are.
Yeah. You're running. I don't know what's chasing you, right?
There's a lot of running.
Or if you can see where you're going, but you're off and running.
Hopefully no granite veins.
Yeah. Shane, what do you think was the biggest thing for you on this, just in terms of like, wow, that's because you've been a builder for a while. What stands out to you in terms of like when you think about the build that really stood out as a learning curve, or however you want to word that?
Well, a couple of things you kind of touched on, but I would call them minor complications in the overall build of these things. I think at the beginning, I will say that I overthought some of the assembly and the building science behind it. And as we were kind of gearing up and working through structural engineering, how to deal with, how these are going to go together on site, whatever, how we're going to cut them, what kind of blade are we going to use to cut this? How I want to be innovative on the cutting side, whatever. I think I overthought a lot of that stuff, thinking there's going to be more problems than there actually were as we got into it. So that was actually reassuring to me, knowing that we're not, trying to, fix some certain things that otherwise would be very simple, like, installing exterior doors and windows. How's the roof going to work if we put these things together? Because as most people know that, or if they don't, maybe they don't, shipping containers are designed to shed water sitting out in the elements. That's what they are. And so they have a convex roof. Putting several together creates this belly. So it was one of those things like, how are we going to get water? It's just a flat roof, and typically flat roofs are going to pool regardless, even in commercial construction. How do you remove the water? So going through some of those things, and how to make these things purely watertight, we had some of that came about. We had and we were dealing with one even recently, just figuring out why a certain thing is leaking. What type of material can we use for penetrations? How many penetrations should we really want, as far as venting and all kinds of stuff? For some of the building mechanical systems. But a lot of those things, like I said, I think were easier to deal with than I originally thought. I think the biggest caveat that we talked about earlier was, how do you get them on site? How much of the construction can or should you do off-site? And I think that comes into just understanding the world of modular construction. And if you're not familiar with that, then I would recommend doing as much as you can on site to kind of combat that. How easy can you make it once the structure is put together? How easy can you make it to get back to conventional construction? And some of that is based on how you're going to frame things, how you're going to seal your windows, your doors. How's everything get installed correctly and in plumb, and thinking about the thermal bridging, like he talked about earlier. A lot of that stuff now has been done for you in the code book. It's telling you have to do it this way, or we're just not going to allow it, right? So you have to design it this way. The architect has to design it this way. The engineer has to design it this way. So I think a lot of that, you're not at the forefront of this anymore. It can be guided just based on what you're going to need for permitting. I think for me, it was just a lot of that was just thought through, understanding how a conventional home goes together. I was trying to make it as, again, conventional as possible, doing that assembly process. And I think some of that doesn't have to be done that way. And, some of the videos we put out there were explaining why I did it that way. But overall, I would say, I'm not going to say it's a simple process to build one of these, but it's I think less intrusive. It's less complicated than building a conventional stick-built home. But I'm not telling people to go out and DIY this whole thing, because you can see a lot of people out there that have done that. I mean, there's YouTuber influencers that have gone out and sort of made a name for themselves doing this. But as you get into the real story of what's going on with some of those, it's you're still building a home. So be careful with that. I don't want to discourage people from trying to complete it on their own. But again, you're going to have to go through the building process. And if you don't understand that, you better figure out who's going to be on your side, whether it be someone like me or a team of people that's in your pocket that you can use. It's still conventional construction for the most part. And that's what I kind of want to, and Evan and I are trying to convey, is it's still conventional construction. It's just not, as a lot of the guys in this world, building homes will say, well, I'm not going to do it that way because that's not how you build a home. The pushback shouldn't be coming from it's overly complicated, because it's not. And I guess that's what I would say.
Yeah, and I think you touched on a couple things there. It's like, in one hand, you want to tell people it's going to cost you the same as building a new home. And on the other hand, you want to tell them, unless you want to approach it a little bit differently. And that's really true for any construction, really. I mean, there are inexpensive homes that can be built, and there are really expensive homes that can be built.
Right.
And I think, again, same horse, still kicking it. It's like, there is no specific reason why you should, and there's not a specific reason why you shouldn't. It's not like, I think people still, from my experience and conversations I've had, like, oh, does this mean now we can do this, or can you just do that? And it's like, well, maybe, but maybe not, and it's like, if you want to try to use a shipping container to build something inexpensively, sure, you can approach it that way, but you could do that with stick built too, right? Like, oh, well, I want to really have a differentiating property, and I'm not necessary, but I have the budget of a stick built new construction home. Great, then it will be different than everything else, and you'll probably spend that amount of money on it. And I think it's like, I think you and I were on a podcast once, Shane, talking about this. It might be an oversimplification on my part, but it's somewhat on purpose to try to get people's mindset correct on this. It's, if you built a home and it's just sheathed on the outside, and it's like, people imagine 3 or 4 people standing around and say, well, what do we want the exterior of this home to look like? It's like, do we want it to be brick? Do we want to do T11 siding or whatever the hell, whatever you want, because inside it's a house. And it's just like, I'm trying to, if I do anything for this community, is to try to help people not go down the wrong rabbit holes to then just be disappointed. Right. To see something and say, if I could build that, and that would be only like $50,000, and then I could Airbnb it for $300 a night. It's like, whoa, stop. You could build a single container one for $50,000. Right. I don't think anyone would want to rent it. Right. If you wanted to fetch that price, it'll probably look like this, and that's going to be more. And unless you really want to sit down, and it's something, I'm speaking for myself, with my new company, Butcher and Swede, that we really want to take a look at, is not necessarily building homes, but can we have a place with skilled workers to where we can have metal workers and woodworkers and engineers on site, with designers as part of the company, and architects, to address this. But I say that because that's what that requires, right? It's like, it requires a team to really address all that stuff. And if your idea is a DIYer, DIYer,
yes, you got it right.
Okay. A DIYer is to do that on your own. We're not telling you don't. If you have the gusto to go do that, and you have some skills, and you're patient, and you're willing to just kind of spend money carefully, but know that you're not sure where it's going to end, right? We're not saying don't do that. We're just saying, but that's no different than saying, I want to try to build a stick-built structure ADU in my backyard. It's still all kind of the same. And for someone to look at how to, take advantage of this, that's not the right word or phrasing, but to look at this optimistically and saying we do have a structure here. And like Shane, think how much time we've talked about just heating and cooling it, whether to use mini splits or whether to actually use conventional forced air. And it's like, well, all right, well, mini splits are fine, right? There's nothing wrong with mini splits. They do require a little bit of, so mini splits, little Samsung things that go up in the ceilings. They still require some venting, right? They will do just a room, but it doesn't mean that now you got to put one in all certain rooms, and we decided, no, we wanted a conditioned crawl space that would make things easy for this one, but that increased the price, right? It would have been cheaper for us to do that. So I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. If you want to look at this as a way to inexpensively build, it is possible for sure, but you're going to have to let go of some of your, Chad, it's no different than taking a buyer to house. It's like, and Shane, you're a broker too. It's like, you got to let go of something. I can't, I got you the 3-car garage. I got you this and that. And I'm sorry, it doesn't have a sunroom. And then you take them and it's like, here's your sunroom, but it only has a 2-car garage. It's like, look, you're going to have to make a concession somewhere. Right? Okay, I found the perfect house for you, but now it's not in the neighborhood that you want.
Right.
And it's really kind of no different. It's like, well, yeah, but I want this, but I want 12-foot ceilings. Okay, well, it's not going to have 12-foot ceilings. You're at best going to have 9.5, right? And if you're going to have 9.5, it's going to have it's going to have corrugated steel ceilings,
right?
And you're going to have exposed conduit probably for your lighting, and it's no different. So I really want that to be something that listeners take away from this is just going through that process mentally.
Yeah, a good analogy is like you have three things. Whenever you're working with someone in service-based business, you can get it done right.
Location. Oh, sorry.
You can get it done right. You can get it done fast, or you can get it done cheaply. Pick 2 out of the 3.
Good, cheap, and fast. You only get 2 of those at the best. You only get 2 of those.
Yeah.
And that's the same with the real estate. And I will say, maybe to kind of put a bow on this, is Chad talking about kind of the real estate side of it. And I know this is a Q&A. So if you guys still have questions, if anyone's still here, got questions, feel free to drop them in there. We will definitely answer them. But Chad, talk about what you've dealt with as we've gone live on the listing and the questions, the feedback, kind of all of that with a container home versus just listing a conventional home, whether it's in the city or not. Just kind of the stuff that you've run into as we've gone live with this.
Yeah. I mean, when we started, obviously took it live when it wasn't a completely finished product, which I was totally fine with because, I felt fairly confident in being able to paint the picture for a buyer to want to get up there and take a look at it. But it's like, it was like pulling teeth, right? And it's the same thing with when you're taking people to new construction homes, right? You could take them and walk up a property that they have under construction. And if they don't have the finishes and, the walls done and like everything put in, the buyer's like, okay, well, what's it going to look like?
Right.
And that was, a lot of the conversations I had around it were people that were reaching out to me, through Instagram, or they had found the websites that I had built for this. And they're just like, man, this is so cool. When is it going to be done? What's the kitchen going to look like? What are they planning on finishing out for the bedrooms? And we had put together, Evan and I had put together different, almost like vision boards in a sense, just kind of like helping people get a feel of what the final product would look like. But a lot of the times I would just be pushing people like, hey, go see the location, see if it's somewhere that you even like, if it's within, a drive time that you want to have. There's a lot of people that are looking for things like this, especially in the remote work environment that we are in.
Right.
And, I've had some questions too, and some feedback on like, all right, well, what's the cell service like? And, we all know that the cell service isn't amazing, but you do have service up there. There are some dead spots, here and there. And those are concerns of buyers. These are things that like you don't typically think about when you're listing a property that is as unique as this one.
Right.
and until you have experience doing something like that as well.
I can
So
tell you
that
the cell service in my town has gone to crap lately, and I'm
yeah,
literally,
it's
so it's not all about just being remotely in the mountains. It's just,
yep.
yeah, checking on that stuff's important for sure.
Mhm. Yeah. But I mean, as we got closer to completion, I started to put a lot more marketing dollars behind this and getting it out to even other agents in the metro area, and in Colorado in general. And I mean, a lot of the questions that even they had was like, well, like, who do you have to help finance something like this? Like, I think I have someone that'd be interested in it, but how do I finance it? I'm like, it's
Right.
go
It,
go
it's a
to
house.
go to Wells Fargo. I don't know. It's a house. Like, you can go there if you want to. I was like, but I'm happy to make the plug for my lender and like hopefully, hey, make him look like he's the only one that can do it, right? But
Mhm.
it's just not necessarily the case. So there's just it's an early adoption phase right now.
Mhm.
And like to your guys' point earlier, you can see a lot of cool Instagram reels and pages about these shipping container homes and people promoting them, but they own them. That's their
Right.
investment already. They're
Yep.
probably cash flowing almost, probably close to $100,000 a year on these things, renting them out because they see the uniqueness in it. They have a process dialed in. They know what it is that they want. Whereas buying something like this on the open market, it's like it's tough for people to wrap their head around. Oh, this should be an investment for me, especially with where you guys chose to build it at.
Right. Yeah, and that's a lot of that is going to be, I think, a struggle for a little while, just in general with this kind of construction, or any type of alternative construction. Is the first question is, well, I mean, we've talked about this all the time. Buying a property, a home, whether it's a primary residence or something else, is usually one of the biggest investments someone will make in their lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to most of the time look for a loan. They're going to go get a lender to help them purchase this. And then second question, as Chad has talked about, is how do I can't get a loan. How do I get a loan? Where do I go? Who do I talk to for this type of build? Well, it's a house. I mean, go anywhere you want. It doesn't matter. They're going to lend on it. It's got it's going to be final CO'd just like anything else would be. It's a house. It just happens that we used containers to build the exterior structure as opposed to wood framing or concrete or any type of other metal. So it's no different and fully allowed by the codes. So it's fully allowed by, as Evan was talking about, Fannie Mae. The lending institutions say go for it. There's no big deal here. So just keep that in mind, as you're looking at something else or this one, whatever it is. It's not as complicated as you think.
Yep. Yeah. Chris has a good question. I'm doing a shop car part out of a 40-foot container. What do you think about using closed cell spray foam in cans just to cover the inside of the container? I was then going to use 1-inch foam board.
Depends on where you are, Chris. But again, going back to the thermal bridging, if you're anything but closed cell foam, it's not going to break that bridge. So if you want to insulate it, here in Colorado, we have to have an R21 value above grade on our walls. So the only way to do that is on a 2x4 frame is to get closed cell spray foam.
Washington State. Yeah.
Yeah. You're most likely going to be very similar, or if not more extreme than us. So if you're not using closed cell foam, and it depends on how deep if you're framing the interior, how deep are you framing that interior? You can't just, if you're asking if you're just can spray foam on the walls, that's not going to work. But you have to have something that contains that depth of the foam. So you can do a combination of interior exterior framing. You could do like a 2-inch rigid foam on the outside. If you're going to clad it with some sort of siding or something, then you could go a little bit less deep on your closed cell foam, but you're going to have to use closed cell foam because you need that thermal bridge to break. 2x3s. Why not 2x4? Just curious. That's something that I've seen a lot in states that are warmer, for sure. By the way, I've seen it in Florida. I've seen it in Texas. South Carolina. I'm trying to think of all the states where, this is kind of like they're trying. And again, you're trying to accomplish as much open area as you can. You don't want to shrink those walls too much. So for us, we have to go with a 2x4 furred wall and then 3.5 minimum foam. But if it's open cell foam, it's not going to do the job.
Yeah, there you go. Save some space. Yeah.
Yep. No, and I think that's fine. You just got to make sure you're hitting your value one way or the other. So if you do 2x3 on the inside, and what is that foam that depth gonna get you? Usually you're about 6.5 on an R value for every inch of closed cell foam. You can go with 1 inch on the outside, 2 inch on the outside, whatever that balance is. I would just look at your local amendments for whatever municipality you're in, and then check code for Washington State. I'm not fully familiar with, but I'm guessing you're going to be very similar to our values here in Colorado.
I guess it also depends on, like, well, this is going to be an unpopular statement. What do the kids call it? It's a hot take. I guess it kind of depends. Like, if this is a remote property, you're not necessarily pulling a permit. You're just wanting to have some sort of structure to park something in. You know what I mean? Shane is referring to is
living
if this in a
structure.
That's all conditioned space. Yeah. So if it's not, then if you're trying to make a workshop, it's as comfortable as you want to be, right? If you're gonna have an interior heater, how you're gonna heat it, cool it, whatever it is. Just think about how comfortable. For my shop, I want to be comfortable. If I'm doing like finished work in there, I need to have it conditioned, because if I'm doing urethanes and paint and all that stuff, whatever it is, even just woodworking in general, I got to have it conditioned. I'm kind of I'm picky, but that's based on your overall thresholds too, and what you're doing in there. If you're just parking trucks and working, and you're a mechanic and you're working on cars, if you want to work with a coat on, go for it.
There you go.
Yeah.
So it's like, I was just thinking, like, if this was in, Seattle, like in Metro Seattle, sure. If Chris has just got looking for an additional workspace or whatever, then it's kind of like, look, we're telling you what it needs to be, and then depending on the usage, what it can be.
Right.
So you could use rigid foam on the outside, do a little bit on the inside, and then if you're just putting, plywood up because it's your shop, or it's your get away from the kids while I go mess around with some tools place, and dangerously drink whiskey and use power tools. Great. Are you comfortable? Love it. It's actually a great question, because depending on the usage, this whole stream has been about building a home with them. And I think what's really interesting for me is the only thing that's really interesting me on the home, building homes with it, is its differentiation in terms of investment. But it's also some of the things it does fix that homes do have a problem with, which is durability, weather. A shipping container home can withstand like an F4 tornado, category 5 or 4 hurricane. Nobody quote me on this, so you can Google it.
Snow. It'll meet all snow loads.
Snow loads, all this stuff. And where I'm interested too is it starting to find a space within the mobile home community. If you could take 2 of these and put them together, it's almost exactly a double wide. It's a little bit different, but roughly the same square feet. And if you can get that cost of construction down, it's a far better. I guarantee you, tornadoes won't drag to them like a magnet, right? No. Because if so, those parks would all still be there. Right. And I think you can design them better. They're, again, pest control. That's a whole issue with I'm just calling for general sakes mobile homes. That's what everybody kind of knows them as, which predominantly is in the South.
Right.
For temporary housing after, like, think FEMA, to be able to have a potential contract with FEMA in terms of disaster area to bring them in. I think there's so much use for that kind of stuff. But other than a home and differentiation and some of those benefits, I think what's interesting about them is getting it more standardized in terms of construction and the trades within construction to open up a whole different avenue of opportunity. Garages is a perfect example of it, right? To be able to say, look, it's not a home, but it is something that I can potentially fabricate off-site, that I don't necessarily, depending on where it's at and what you're doing, have to go through some of the rigorous process. And I'm just two of these. If you take two 20-footers and you put them just side by side, they're 8 feet wide. So you end up getting a rough open space that is 40 by 16. And that, not a lot of 16-foot cars since the 70s got over, right? So that's a little joke because they're like big land boats. So you really, at that point, you're like, dude, it's perfect, right? And you can cut them out and you can put a garage door on it and you're off and running. So I think some of that usage is great. And one of the things I'm interested in is separate spaces, whether it's an ADU or not, whether you want a recording studio. It's a lot less expensive, even despite what we're saying that it's not as cheap as you think it is. It's still a lot less expensive and intrusive as doing an addition on your home. Right. So if you have the lot, if you have the access in terms of what we were talking about before, to be able to have one of these craned in, it's a lot less intrusive to your property, to your what's going on. And you can all of a sudden add a studio. You can add a man cave, she shed, an office. Like, I would love that, to not have my office in the basement and hear kids dribbling basketballs upstairs, which has been going on during this podcast or live stream, to a gym, to a pool house, to or
a
what
pool.
I would.
You can make pools out of
You can make pools out of them.
Yeah.
I think some of that stuff, but I think what that's going to really require, and I really think that is going to be the space for these moving forward. I do think there is a limit when I think about this scaling out 10, 15 years. You are starting with an upcycled material that's used for something else. And I think if this becomes a lot more standardized, that what you'll find is, instead of a factory line pumping out 40 by 8 foot by 9.5 perfect structures, they're going to say, it looks like people want building cubes.
Right.
And we're not going to make them for boats and ships. We're going to make them for construction. And I think you'll start to see that at some point in the future. But it will only get there once people like Shane are comfortable with them. People like Daryl, as an investor, is willing to look at these as an opportunity. And you get more trades, you get more framers and more people, engineers and architects. But once that happens, I think it will really start to move the needle. And I think, weirdly enough, even more than 3D printing, even more than a lot of this other stuff, it's going to be frickin' shipping containers. And this will probably be the last thing I'll say on this. If I do anything on this podcast, I would love for us to stop calling them shipping container homes. They're steel homes. Right, that is part of the problem.
Steel construction.
It's a steel house. You wouldn't be like, I have this really great idea for brick homes. Like, wait, brick homes? You're confusing me. Yeah, brick homes, but they look colonial. A colonial house made of brick. Brick homes. It is what really makes this, I think, difficult. Let's see, tips or tricks on windows, doors install. Thinking of square tubing, window frame, then weld to container.
You got it pretty much dialed, Chris, for the most part. It's really, after that, the install on how you want to install your window, how you're going to flash your window. I think I have the most amazing way to do it, but that's because I'm very, very conceited. But honestly, no, seriously, check out. I've got a couple of videos up on how we did the windows. It's really the framing and how you want to, if you're going to install directly to the steel tubing, which you do need to have because there is some deflection in that, and that's the corrugation as you cut them out. You want to make sure that thing doesn't rack on you, because again, you're putting it around, a piece of steel that has flexibility. It's like that corrugation is like 1/8 of an inch thick on most containers, so it's not very thick. So when you're putting things against it, again, we're talking about the heating and cooling of these things. There's movement in every home. There's movement in a container. Think about that stuff. You're either screwing through the frame of the window, which I think is going to create more of that flexibility of movement, or you can have the flange of the window and you just slap it straight onto the framing, which is a window buck that's made of wood, and you screw it just into the framing just like you would conventionally. Whoops, sorry. And I think that's the better way to go because it's easier to flash the window. But other than that, I think even better than steel tubing, if I was to, kind of manufacture a way to kind of prefab everything, was to use angle iron, which actually lips down the sides of the corrugation instead of the tubing, which can get a little awkward because the tubing is thicker than the corrugation of the wall. The angle iron, you can get almost completely flush with it, and it just makes it easier. There's a lot of ways to do it, and again, a lot of information out on the intrawebs, but a couple different ways to think about going that way. There's a walking door in a metal framed and sided shop. Yeah, I mean, it's just that's the way you want to do it.
Yeah,
and Keith, hopefully I answered your question earlier, but yeah, you got it. Make sure everything's sealed up. I mean, that's kind of what you're thinking. You want to do it right, flash it, insulate it, make sure that allow with movement that you're not going to have problems coming down the road somewhere. There's the little things you're dealing with when you're, again, as we're kind of getting into the build process of, moving forward with this type of construction. That's one way to think about doing stuff. And, you're going to learn, and we're all going to learn how to get better at some of these things or make them less complicated. So it's just, that's the fun of it. Well, any other questions? I think we've covered a fair amount. I think, again, ours was called the Nook. It's in the mountains of Colorado. So we're dealing with different conditions than a lot of people that have come and gone through the stream have had questions on. So just consider that. But at the same time, I think a lot of the nuances with using these containers is going to be the same across the country. I think there's ways to save even more money if we were to do, again, this exact same model again, as opposed to other ones we'll be doing. I think there's definitely money saving just kind of on the learning curve side, but it's I think it's a great way to do it. Again, don't think you're going to build a 44,000 square foot home using all containers and be a third of the cost conventionally. That's not true. And if you see somebody out there on Instagram or on the intraweb somewhere telling you that, they're full of what. So just keep that in mind. But again, there are definite benefits to doing this. I think there's definite benefits to doing it the way we did it on this one. If you want to come see it in your local, or if you're not local and to fly in, hey, even better, contact Chad. All that information is out there to go ahead and just get if you want to get on the schedule to come look at it. We are going to do an open house for different varieties of people. We'll make sure that we post that to let everybody know when that's going to happen. If you got any other questions in the meantime, you can drop them in the comments. We'll get to them later. And again, if you want to come see it, you're more than welcome to come see it before it's gone. I think it's a cool property to come look at. It's on a 3-acre parcel, so there's plenty to look at when you get there too. So it's worth the drive for sure. Other than that, that's about all I got, gentlemen. Do you have anything else?
That's it.
I was going to say I did a terrible job emceeing at the beginning, and I was going to say, we should cover, who the heck are you guys? Why should people care? And how do we get hold of you? Yeah.
Why are you talking?
Yeah. Because I mean, like, you guys both have honestly amazing backgrounds and awesome stories to share with people, and y'all are like, God, you're the best at what you do, in my opinion. So,
thank you. We try for sure.
We can cover that just real quick. Shane and I are cousins. We have the last name.
See that down there? It says Bailey. It's actually because we're related. Yeah, it's not a coincidence.
Our dads are brothers. I don't know if you guys understand cousins.
In this state, at least.
Shane and I co-owned Bailey Custom Homes for a while. Shane now runs Bailey Custom Homes on his own independently. He also has built by. I'm answering for Shane. Jesus, what the fuck is wrong with me? I can do it myself. Shane, you cover you. I'll cover me. I am not a builder. I'm not a general contractor. I love design. I'm a serial entrepreneur. Shane and I have flipped a lot of homes. We've done a lot of interesting things together. Daryl Morgan, who is not on this screen, he is also our partner. He's a friend of mine, an investor. And we do a lot of things kind of in this space. We do a lot of things different. Shane and I have had podcasts together. Shane still podcasts quite a bit. I am currently opening up with another partner, Nathaniel Shu of Shu Enterprises. It's called Butcher and Swede. I'm the butcher. He's the Swede. It's a design, fabrication, and manufacturing company. So that would work pretty much in the architectural space with builders, designers, anywhere from making $60,000 tables to helping finish out the design and fabrication for things like Red Rock Amphitheater. And we got quite a bit of really talented makers. I think some of them are on this call now. Wood form and metal form. These people have been making beautiful things forever. So that is the reason that is what we're doing is partially because of this. We're interested in working with really talented and creative people, making really creative and problem-solving creating problem-solving designs for stuff like this. So we'll, like for example, we have a contract with a company to make like literally $100,000 speakers, which I didn't even know was a thing until I listened to them, and I was like, oh my god, I get it. To Banjo Next, to designing and building small micro trailers, to all kinds of things. So that's what I'm doing right now. That's kind of my background in terms of what's in context of this, but own restaurants and coffee shops and things like that. So just a serial entrepreneur who is interested in anything that basically has never been done, right? And trying to tackle that with interesting people.
Most of the time.
Most of the time. They're all interesting. I don't know if they're all people. I'm just kidding.
Well, anymore, I don't know. It's become more of a question for sure. Yeah, I think I'm the same person. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been involved in a lot of things over the years on top of what I do for a living. I've certainly dabbled in probably almost everything you can think of. I have been in business with Evan on many different ventures. I am a real estate agent like Chad, but I don't do it the same way Chad does anymore. I used to. I had my own brokerage for a while. I still have a brokerage. I just don't have any agents anymore. And it's for different reasons. I'm very specialized. I did construction consulting. I did, I still trade actively in the stock market during the day. I mean, sometimes I'm on my phone and I've got my crew yelling at me about what I'm doing, and they're constantly asking me, how do you do that? And I said, well, today, let's not do that because I'm losing money. But I touch on, I don't know if I get bored easily or not, but that's just, I always come back to the building industry because I love it. I have to be active. I can't be in front of a computer. I love building things, love creating things. And in a moment in time here in my life where it's like, how can we do it better? How can we make it more beneficial to the general public? How can it be cooler and more innovative? And that's kind of where we landed here at this point. And I'm excited to move forward with kind of more of that side of the construction world. I'm hoping more people will not make it such a caveat or a tarnished, a tarnished type of tag to say that, well, you're a framer, you're a plumber, you're an electrician, you set tile, you lay floors, whatever it is, that, you're unsuccessful, or you need to go to school and get 5 degrees and spend a bunch of money. I'm hoping that as we move forward and make this kind of a cooler place to be, that more kids, especially coming out of high school, will understand this is a great place to make a lot of money, learn, be innovative, be creative, be successful. And I think this is just one piece of the puzzle that may allow more of these people just to kind of open their eyes and say, yeah, maybe I do want to try that. Maybe I do want to be part of that. And I'm hoping that'll be the case, especially with this project we did, just drawing more people in and saying, well, I want to be part of it somehow, some way. Let's figure that out. So we will invite all of those people in and say, you know, how can I help? How can I be part of it? What can I do? Will you buy the Nook? So forth. So, yeah, that's, I geek out on that stuff, and I'm hoping more people will kind of take note of that. And that's
Sweet.
That's a wrap.
Love it.
Yeah.
Thank
Love
you,
it.
guys.
Feel free to reach out to any of us. I don't know how the hell you do that, but I think you guys handle that, right?
Start with the comments below. Instagram.
Yeah. We're super easy to find. Just Google.
Just like Evan said at the beginning, Google.
Yeah.
Google is a great way. I mean, I'm pretty active on Instagram just because I think it's fun at this point. I don't know why I think it's fun, but it is. I like posting videos about stuff on there. Chad's big time on Instagram as well. We both have our YouTube channels. You can certainly Google us. There's phone numbers. Built by Bailey's is the website, and you can find Evan there too. So we'd love to hear more from, any questions you guys have moving forward. And again, like I said, that link is in there if you want to come see the Nook in particular and see how a container home was built just on our end. Reach out to Chad. Come on up and look at it. And I appreciate everybody stopping in and out and asking questions. It's been fun, and hopefully we've accomplished something in this. I don't know how long we've been, almost 2 hours. So yay for us.
Flew by. I love it.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right, guys. I appreciate you, gentlemen. Go do what you're going to do this evening, and we'll be in touch. Everybody else, thank you very much. Until next time, let's keep building. All right, guys.
All right. Bye, guys.
Later.
Later.